Good day, ma'am. My name is Roldan S. Ihan Jr., a second year criminology student. And today I am going to report the institutional correction. So, what is the institutional correction? The institutional correction refers to those persons housed in secure correctional facilities. Corrections, a branch of administration of the criminal justice system, charged with the responsibility for the custody, supervision, and rehabilitation of the convicted offenders. It is the fourth and it is considered to be the weakest pillar of the criminal justice in the Philippines. It is considered to be the weakest pillar because of failure to deter individuals in committing crimes as well as reformation of criminal offenders. Correctional administration, the study of practice in systematic management concerned with the custody treatment and rehabilitation of criminal offenders. The correctional as a process refers to the reorientation of the criminal offender to prevent him or her from repeating his deviant, abnormal, or delinquent criminal, felonious, wrong, and action without the necessary of taking punitive actions but rather the introduction of individual measures of reformation. Custody, guarding and penal safekeeping. The maintenance of care and protection according to the who by authority of law are temporarily incarcerated, confined, in prison, locked up for violations of law, and also those who were sentenced by the court to serve judgment. Case work in correctional work includes the professional service rendered by professionally trained personnel in the description of social treatment of offenders. Institution-based correction practices offenders found guilty and sentenced by the courts for confinement and categorized based on the length of sentence into either municipal, city, provincial, or national prisoner facilities based on these categorizations. Diversification, the principle of separating homogeneous types of prisoners that requires special treatments and custody. The imprisonment, the process putting the offenders in the prison for the purpose of protecting the public and at the same time rehabilitating them by requiring the later of undergo institutional treatment program. Penology, the study of punishment for the crime or of the criminal offenders, is a term or derived from the Latin word pena or means pain or suffering, otherwise known as a penal science, and can be defined as a division of criminology that deals with the prison management and treatment of offenders and concern itself with the philosophy of practice of society in its effort to repress criminal activities. The punishment, penalty, and penal management. First is the punishment. So what is the punishment? It is the redress that the state takes against an offending members for the transgression of law. And the penalty, the suffering that the state takes against the offender members for the transgression of law. Penal management is the manner of practice or controlling places of confinement like jails or prison. The Bureau of Correction. So what is the Bureau of Correction? The Bureau of Correction is under the Department of Justice. It is headed by the Director of Corrections, who is authorized to exercise command, control, and directions of the following prisons, facilities, and staff offices. The Philippine Correctional System. In the early prisons in the Philippines, the formal prison system is in the Philippines started only during the Spanish regime. So what are the institutional corrections in the Philippines? We have the 7 penal institution in the Philippines. First is the New Bilibid Prison, Davao Prison and Penal Farm, Cebu Provincial Detention and Rehabilitation Center, the Correctional Institution for Women, Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm, South Cotabato Rehabilitation and Detention Center, the Manila City Jail. So first, let us know when the Bilibid was made. In the 1847, the old Bilibid prison was constructed as the main penitentiary and designed to house the prison population of the country. In the June 25, 1865, the old Bilibid prison or carcel, known as the Carcele Presidio Correctional Jail and Military Prison, occupied with a rectangular piece of land which was part of the Mahalike estate in the heart of the Manila, was formally opened or established. The penitentiary concept. The term penitentiary came from the Latin word penitentia, meaning penitence, and was coined by John Howard. It refers to a place where the crime and sin may be atoned for the penitence produced. In the 1936, the city of Manila exchanged its Muntinlupa property with the Bureau of Prisons, originally intended as a site for boys' training school. Today, the old Bilibid prison is now being used as the Manila City Jail, famous as the May Haligi Estate. In the 1941, the new facility was officially named the New Bilibid Prison. The Bureau of Corrections was renamed Bureau of Corrections under the Executive Order of 292 passed during the Aquino administration. It is headed by the director appointed by the President of the Philippines. Organization and key positions of the Bureau of Corrections. In the RA 10575, the Bureau of Corrections Act of 2013. The Bukor shall be headed by the director, who shall be assisted by the 3 deputy directors, 1 for the administrations, 1 for the security and operation, and 1 for the reformation, all of whom shall be appointed by the President upon the recommendation of the Secretary of the DOJ. The director of the deputy directors of Bukor shall serve the tour of not to exceed 6 years from the date of appointment. The head of the corps with the rank of undersecretary shall be the position and title of the Director General of Corrections. The second officer of the command of the Bukor with the rank of Assistant Secretary shall be the position and title of the Deputy Directions of Correction. The third officer in the command of the Chief Corps with the rank of Superintendent shall have the position titled of the Corrections Chief and Superintendent. The fourth officer in the command of the Bukor with the rank of Senior Superintendent shall be positioned and titled of the Corrections Senior Superintendent. The fifth officer in the command of Bukor with the rank of Superintendent shall have the position and titled of Corrections and Superintendent. Operating units of the Bureau of Corrections. The 7 correctional facilities of the Bureau of Corrections. First is the New Bilibid Prison or NBP, located in the Muntinlupa City, where the Bureau of Corrections Central Office is located. Within the complex are 3 security camps administered by the penal superintendent and assisted by the assistant superintendent in each camp. Is the main insular penitentiary designed to house the prison population of the Philippines. The 3 security camps, the maximum security compound, the prisoner whose sentence are 20 years and above, life termers or those under capital punishment, those with the pending cases, those under disciplinary punishment, whose cases are not appeal or on appeal, the under detention, and those that do not fall under medium and minimum security status. The second is the maximum security camp is for prisoners whose sentence are below 20 years, computed from the minimum sentence per classification, interpretation, and those classified for colony assignment. Third is the minimum security compound, open camp with less restriction and regimentation. The prisoners who are 65 years old and above, medically certified as invalids. For prisoners who have 6 months or less to serve before they are released in the prison. The Bilibid Prison or NBP. The NBP was established due to the increased rate of prisoners. Has a land area of 552 hectares. The NBP housed maximum security convicts include the death row, the electric chair, and the lethal injection chamber when it was still in use. It is considered as one of the biggest prisons in the world in terms of number of prisoners by population. Today, the new Bilibid prison operates 2 satellite units, namely the Bukang Liwayway camp. It houses the minimum security prisoners who work in the various projects of the institution. Second is the Sampaguita camp. It is located in the reception and diagnostics center and housed of the medium security unit and the youth rehabilitation center. The Correctional Institution for Women or CIW. It was established in 1933 by virtue of Act 3579 passed and consists of 18 hectares in the November 27, 1929. It is the one and only prison for women in the Philippines. San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm in Zamboanga, founded by the Captain Ramon Blanco for the Spanish Royal Army. It was established for the confinement of Muslim and political offenders. Established on August 29, 1869, the oldest correctional facility in the country, has an area of 1,246 hectares with the principal product of copra and fishing farm. 4. Number 4 is the Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm, former Luhit Penal Settlement. It was from the facility that the term prison without walls had its beginning, established on the orders of Governor Forbes. It has a land total area of 36,000 hectares. Established on November 16, 1904. It was used originally for the confinement of the incorrigibles and intractable prisoners. In the 1905, it was converted for the confinement of well-tractable, behaved and prisoners. For sub-colonies of Iwahig Penal Farm, in Wagan sub-colony, we have the Montibol sub-colony and the Santa Lucia sub-colony, and the last is the Central sub-colony. Davao Prison and Penal Farm, founded by General Paulino Santos, created by virtue of the Act 3732 and Proclamation 414 series of 1931. Formerly known as the Picol, built on January 21, 1932, located in Santo Tomas, Davao del Norte. Mostly devoted to abaca and banana plantation. In 1942, it was used as a concentration camp for American prisoners of war. It is the main source of income of Bureau of Corrections. It consists of 18,000 hectares. The Davao Sub-Colony of the Panabo and Kapalong. Tanglao Settlement sites for released prisoners who no longer like to leave Davao. The 6th Sablayan Prison and Penal Farm, founded in the September 27, 1954 by virtue of Proclamation number 72. It consists of 16,190 hectares in Sablayan, Occidental Mindoro. Sablayan Prison and Penal Farm of the prisons near to Metro Manila. Primary product is rice that is used also to supply the NDP. The 7th and last is the Leyte Regional Prison or in Abuyog, Leyte, established on January 16, 1973 under the proclamation of 1101 during the martial law with the aim of regionalizing the prisons in the country. The last penal facility to built by the Bureau of Correction. The Bureau of Prisons rather. The commitment and classification of prisoners or detainees. Categories of inmates. Prisoner, inmate who is convicted by the judgment or final judgment. And the detainee, inmate who is not yet convicted. Classification of detainees. Undergoing investigation, and the second is awaiting or undergoing trial. C. Awaiting final judgment. The classifications of prisoners. Insular or national prisoners who were sentenced to a prison term of over 3 years. City prisoners, those who have sentenced to suffer an imprisonment of less than 3 years or to pay a fine of not more than 100,000 or 1,000 pesos or both. Provincial prisoners, those sentenced to suffer a term of imprisonment from 6 months to 1 day to 3 years of fine not more than 1,000 or both. Municipal prisoners, those confined to serve an imprisonment of not more than 6 months. Classifications of prisoners according to degree of security. The super maximum security prisoners not applicable in the Philippines, composed with the tractable and highly dangerous of corregidor persons who are the source of constant disturbance even in a maximum security prison. They wear orange color of uniform. The maximum security prisoners include a highly dangerous or high security risk who required a high degree of control. Their movements are restricted and they are not allowed to work outside the institution but rather assigned to industrial shops within the prison compound. They wear orange color uniform. What is a maximum security facility? A facility with a thick wall enclosure of 18 to 25 feet with the high constructed catwalks, patrol towers, and patrol guards for day and night. The medium security prisoners. This shall include those who cannot be trusted in less security areas and those whose conduct or behavior require minimum supervision. They occupy the medium security prisons Camp Sampaguita, and they wear blue color of uniforms. Generally, they are employed as the agricultural workers. So what is the medium security institution? Fences are utilized instead of walls. The structure is created for prisoners housed in dormitories. The specifications for construction of two fences with the interior fence approximately 12 to 14 feet high and the outer fence 8 to 12 feet high, and they are to be raised at least 18 feet apart. The third is the minimum security prisoners. These shall include those who can be reasonably trusted to serve their sentence under less restricted conditions. They occupy the minimum security prison Camp Bukang Liwayway. They wear brown color of uniform. So what is the minimum security? The type of facility has the main objective of keeping civilians away, and it is not created for purposes of preventing escape. Prisoners are free, subject to compliance, to move about the curfew hours. Classifications of inmates according to security risk. The high-risk inmates, those considered as highly dangerous with or highly probability of escaping. High-profile inmates, those who are not necessarily charged with heinous crimes but are prominent figures in security or public figures whose cases have drawn public interest. The high value target, or HVT, target either a resource of a person who may either be an enemy combatant, high ranking official, or a civilian in danger of capture or death, typically in the position of critical intelligence, data, or authority marked as an objective for a mission and which a commander requires for the successful completion the same. Security Threat Group. Any formal or informal or going inmates, groups, gangs, associations, or organizations consisting of 3 or more members falling into one of the following basic categories: street gangs, prison gangs, outlaw gangs, traditional organized crime, aboriginal gang, subversive groups, and terrorists. Subversive group, a group of prisons that adopts or advocates subversive principle of facilities tending to overthrow or undermine an establishment government. Terrorist group, a group of persons that commits any of the following: privacy and mutiny in the high seas or the Philippine water, rebellion or insurrection, coup d'etat, murder, kidnapping, and serious illegal detention, crimes involving destruction, arson, hijacking, violation of laws, and toxic substances and hazardous and nuclear waste control, violations of atomic energy regulations, anti-privacy, and anti-highway robbery, illegal and unlawful possession, manufacture, dealing in acquisitions or dispositions of firearms, ammunitions, or explosives. Violent extreme misdefender or VEO, persons whose political or religious ideologies are considered far outside the maintenance mainstream attitudes of the society, resorting to the employment of violence in the furtherance of his or her beliefs. And the medium risk inmates, those who represent a moderate risk to the public and staff. These inmates still require greater security control and supervisions, as they might escape from the might commit violence inside the jail. The minimum risk inmates, ordinary inmates, Those inmates who have lesser tendencies to commit offenses and generally pose the least risk to public safety. In most cases, they may be first time offenders and are charged with light offenses. Admissions and confinement of inmates of Pukor. Safekeeping. The custodial component of the Pukor present correction system reformation. The rehabilitation component of the Pukor's present correction systems. Manning level of the Pukor. Custodial personnel to inmate ratio 1:7. B. Reformation personnel to inmate ratio 1:24. Operations of Bureau of Corrections. A. The Directorate for Reception and Diagnostic, or the DRD, former DIRDC. Function. Each shall receive, study, and classify inmates and detainees committed to the BUCOR. It shall undertake reception of inmates. The quarantine cell or unit, a section of the RDC where the prisoners is given through physical examination including blood test, x-rays, vaccination, and immunity. An inmate shall be placed in the quarantine for at least 5 days. The global view on prison administration. In 2018, the Philippines held the sixth highest prison population out of 21 Asian countries. As of 2019, the Philippines population rested those people were incarcerated. Therefore, the Philippines has an incarceration rate of about 200 per 100,000 citizens. There are 933 prisons running in the Philippines. Unfortunately, they are mismanaged and overcrowded. The 5 important facts about the incarceration system in the Philippines. Number 1 is the severe overcrowding. Number 2 is the pre-trial detainees. Number 3 is hide tools. Number 4 is vigilante justice. Number 5 is corruption. So the severe overcrowding of the prisoners in different jails of the country. This severe overcrowding in the prisons leads to illness and death tolls in the thousands. Pre-trial detainees. According to the World Prison Brief, 75.1% of incarcerations with the Philippines incarceration system are pre-trial. In the 2018, 141 of 422 of 188,278 prisoners were pre-trial detainees. Pre-trial detention is found in judicial system all over the world. Pre-trial detention places a heavy burden on penitentiary systems and increasingly contributes the overcrowding. Are pre-trial detainees prisoners? So, as a pre-trial detainee, you have not been convicted of a crime and not considered guilty. because of the difference between pretrial detainees and detainees and convicted prisoners. You might think that the detainees would have greater rights and privilege than convicted prisoners. The Haidit tools about 5,200 inmates die annually at the New Bilibid Prison or NBP. In 2019, Ernesto Tamayo, the hospital medical chief, reports at the Philippine Senate hearing that at least one prisoner dies at NBP each day. These deaths are due to overcrowding, dirty living conditions, and inmate violence. Politicians and prison employees are working to reduce overcrowding the Philippines prisons. Human rights advocates have also called for release of vulnerable inmates, hoping to protect them from poor living conditions. The vigilante justice. The 30s war on drugs escalated during his presidency. Jobless citizens were recruited to kill and created the belief that extrajudicial violence and murder are necessary to fight crime. But the human rights was has torn the narrative around on the 30. They are publicizing information about the vigilante justice in the Philippines. And the corruption? Corruption in the Bureau of Corrections comes in more ways than just the so-called Good Conduct Time Allowance or GCTA for sale shame. History of prisons in the third millennia BC, modern civilization. Mostly used concept of prisons as a mean to detain and remove personal freedoms of incarcerated people, used as the temporary stopgap before sentencing to death or life of slavery. The first millennia BC, located on the areas of mighty ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Prisons, located in the underground dungeons where guilty or suspected criminals spent their life either awaiting death sentence or a command to become slaves, often working as galley slaves. In Greece, home of the modern democracy, prisoners were held in the poorly isolated buildings where they could often be visited by their friends and family. Primary source of their detention were not dungeons, high walls or bars, but simply wooden blocks that were attached to their feet. Ancient Roman Empire. Prisons were built almost exclusively underground, with tight and claustrophobic passageways and cells. Prisoners themselves were held either in simple cells or chained to the walls for life or for time. As slavery was accepted norm in those days, majority of prisoners that were not sentenced to death were sold as slaves or used by the Roman government as workforce. One of the most famous uses for the slaves in the Roman Empire was as gladiators. In the 1166 English King Henry II commissioned the construction of first prison, together with new legal system that used concept of jury. In 1215, the most historic prison legislation was introduced. The Magna Carta signed King John stated that no man could be imprisoned without trial. In the 19th century England, during this time, prisoners started receiving more care. Concept of rehabilitation. Solitary confinement which was primary source of the increased numbers of insane, suicidal, and catatonic prisoners, was that engulfed the world in the beginning of 20th century, brought the formation of amounts of war prison camps and concentration camps. During the end of 20th century, modern prison system was finalized. In the 1991, concept of probation service was introduced. Supermax prisons became widespread across the entire United States. Different types of prisons, antiquity times. Religious role in prisons. It contributes to the individual growth or development of the particular inmate. Is to perceive role of religious in helping lower the chances of recidivism among inmates, to improve their own self-concept. What are the reasons for inmates' religious involvement? Correctional inmates may also become involved with the religion to gain protection, meet other inmates, meet volunteers, or obtain special prison resources. The physical protection. To be safe, many inmates believe that they need to be part of the group which can provide physical protection from other inmates. Does involvement in religion help prisoners adjust to prison? There are three general ways in which prisoners say religion can ease the pains of incarceration. They can deal with the ills that affect them, can ease the ills that affects, can help inmates to be able to avoid more crimes. Chaplain, the most important person in rehabilitative setup of the correctional institution, who points to the prisoners their relationship to God and their fellow men. And what are its functions? The functions: conduct of the sacramental ministry, conduct a religious instruction, ministry to inmate facilities, and a related concerned person. The ministerial service to the staff and the operational personnel. Interpretation ministry to the community, and the administrative function of chaplain, member of the RDC staff, members of the classification committee, render evaluation. Imprisonment under church jurisdiction became substitute to corporal or capital punishment. In medieval times, the Roman Catholic Church developed penal techniques later used by the secular states such as the monastic cell that served as a punishment place for criminal offenders. In the 1593, the Protestant of Amsterdam built a house of correction for women and one for men in 1603. In Rome, what are now the Sisters of the Good Shepherd built the correctional facilities for women. In the 1703, the Pope Clement the Sixth built the famous Michel prison as a house of correction for younger offenders with separation, silence, work, and prayer emphasized. As late as the 18th century, the Vatican prison still served as a model prison designed for Europe and America. The early settlers of North America brought with the customs and common laws of England, including the fellery, the stocks, and the whipping post. During the 18th century, isolating offenders from the fellow prisoners became the accepted correctional practice. The term penitentiary was derived. West Jersey and Pennsylvania Quakers were primarily responsible for many of prison reforms. Developed the idea of substituting imprisonment for corporal punishment and combining the idea of the prison with the workhouse. The prototype of this regime was the Walnut Street Jail in the Philadelphia that in style reflected the Quakers' belief in man's ability to reform through reflection and remorse. Walnut Street Jail. The Walnut Street Jail, built in the 1773 to relieve overcrowding at the older High Street Jail, was the site of Quaker experiment in the reform of criminals. The Auburn system is a penal method of the 19th century in which persons worked during the day in groups and were kept in solitary confinement at night with enforced silence at all times. Mood Ballington Booth. Most famous advocates for volunteers in corrections, the daughter-in-law of William Booth, who founded the Salvation Army. Volunteers are vital to religious programs, and without them, inmates' participation would surely be limited. Faith representatives would be unable to minister to the large number and variety of inmates. The Pennsylvania prison system. Solitary system, where prisoners are confined in single cell day and night. In both prison system, complete silence was being enforced. And thank you. God bless. and keep safe, everyone. By the way, that is the end of my report. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and thank you very much for our very good teacher of this subject, Mrs. Jill Rose Piador. Mrs. Jill Rose Piador. Thank you very much, ma'am, and God bless.